You're watching World Insight, still to come on the program. Chaotic transition of power in the U.S. What does it mean for the rest of the world? We speak to Kishore Mahbubani, a Singaporean diplomat and a well-known scholar, right after the break.
And this is, of course, the saddest reality.
Welcome back. This is World Insight. I'm Tian Wei. Next, let's take a look at the chaotic transition of power in the U.S. Last week, rioting in the Capitol building left many questioning the strength of democracy, at least the U.S. version. President Donald Trump has now pledged an orderly transfer of power, but one can hardly find any order in his legacy. Throughout his term, many believe Trump has been intent on reshaping American government and refocusing its foreign policy in an unprecedented manner, together with members of his administration. With just 8 days until President-elect Joe Biden is sworn in, the whole world is watching which direction the U.S. goes next. What does the uncertain process mean for the rest of the world? For answers, I talked to Mr. Kishore Mahbubani, Distinguished Fellow from the Asia Research Institute of National University of Singapore. Mr. Mahbubani was Singapore's former permanent representative to the United Nations and has served as president of the UN Security Council between 2001 to 2002. His recent book, Has China Won?, states that geopolitical context of the 21st century is between China and the U.S. Is it true? Take a listen. Under the current circumstances. Professor, what a pleasure to see you. Thank you for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me on.
So many things going on in the U.S. over the past week. What is your take of all happened so far?
Well, I would say it would be a huge mistake to try and pass judgment so quickly on what has happened last Wednesday in Washington, D.C., because when the history of the United States is written, the United States is not a very old country, so less than 250 years old, certainly that date, last Wednesday, will be recorded as one of the most significant dates in American history, because never before in American history have you had a situation where a sitting president tries to use a mob to overturn a decision made by the people of America and a decision that was about to be confirmed by the Congress of America. So what happened clearly on last Wednesday was very, very shocking. And it will take some time for us to absorb the real significance of that event and also to understand the structural causes that caused this event.
What do you consider as some of the most important issues that you would love to know better about and analyze more about? As you said, we are not doing any conclusion right here, but certainly we could do some quite educated, quote unquote, guesses and analysis. So tell me more about some of the important points that you are watching very closely about how things are evolving around.
Well, I would say that there are a couple of deep structural causes, because what's happening in the United States is because it's such a polarized country now, such a divided country. So if you read the liberal media, all they do is blame Trump. But you cannot just blame Trump alone, because at the end of the day, in November, over 74 million Americans voted for Trump. So you got to understand, why did 74 million Americans voted for Trump? And that is the most fundamental issue that needs to be addressed. And I believe the structural causes behind the unhappiness in America, firstly, and this is what I document in my book, Has China Won?, the United States of America has become a plutocracy. Now, what's the difference between a plutocracy and a democracy? A democracy is a government of the people, by the people, for the people. So in democracy, you have a government that takes care of the largest number of people. In a plutocracy, you have a government that just takes care of the top 1%. And this is, of course, the saddest reality of the United States, which many Americans are in denial about, which is that the American political system has been hijacked by the very wealthy. And as a consequence of that, the bottom 50%, and this is statistically confirmed, by the way, the bottom 50% haven't seen their average income or living standards improve over a 30-year period. And that's why there's so much unhappiness among the white working classes,
Yeah.
because they haven't seen their livelihoods improve at all, while the wealthy in America are getting richer and richer. But that's only one side of the problem. That's the economic side of the problem. But there's also a cultural side of the problem, which is that, again, the white working classes felt a sense of ownership of the United States of America. And now they increasingly feel, as they're becoming numerically, in a sense, not a majority anymore, but a plurality, they feel that they're losing control of their country. So if you watch the people, if you had seen the television scenes, and I watched the television scenes carefully, the entire mob was white, working classes, white middle classes. There were no blacks, there were no Asians in that group participating in that. And that's also a cultural issue where the white working classes feel, hey, we're no longer in control of our country. So that's why they went to Congress. They say, I'm going to take back my government.
Yeah.
So these are very deep structural issues that have to be understood in depth before you can understand what happened last Wednesday in the United States of America.
Professor Mahbubani, and therefore one would ask whether the system that the U.S. is having right now will be able to address some of those systemic problems that you just said. In that sense, are you confident?
The United States has bounced back very strongly from different crises. You remember when Jimmy Carter was president and he spoke about the malaise that was hitting America. There was tremendous pessimism about the future of America. And then you notice how strongly America bounced back in the 1980s after the malaise of the 1970s. So America goes through these cycles, and it is therefore conceivable that it can turn around, but it'll be difficult. I must emphasize this, because of if you look at all the crises that the United States has gone through from the past 250 years, I would say this is bad. This is as bad as the American Civil War of the 1860s, and you can see that this is about as divided as America has been since the American Civil War, because there is no dialogue, no middle ground between the two sides. And this will be clearly Joe Biden's biggest challenge. I mean, he's becoming president of America at one of the most difficult moments in American history. And therefore, it would be wiser for him to focus on domestic challenges.
So, Professor Mahbubani, what does it mean for all of us? Because what we are doing right now is to analyze the United States from outside, right? As you said, it's now our country, and we could expect different circumstances and possibilities to happen at any moment. But what does it mean for the others who want to still minimize the unpredictability level, who also want to minimize the danger that one country, one culture, and the global trade, that the global pandemic is facing right now? What does it mean to all of us, Professor Mahbubani, watching what's happening?
I would say when you speak of all of us, I would certainly make a distinction between China and the rest of the world, because as you know, there is a strong bipartisan consensus in the United States body politic that the time has come for the US to stand up to China. And there is, as you know, the US-China geopolitical contest has begun, and that's what my book, Has China Won, is about. But at the same time, I would say, I'm told the Chinese word for crisis is a combination of two characters, danger and opportunity. I hope that's correct. The danger for China is very clear, because for China, if the country is angry and people want to distract attention from domestic issues, they try to use China as a distraction, and that's a danger that's real. And you saw, I was very stunned by Mike Pompeo's rather, I must say, erratic decision to lift all restrictions on dealings with Taiwan. That's exactly the wrong thing to do at a time when your country is in trouble. But that's an example of how things can go wrong if angry people are looking for a scapegoat. But at the same time, there's also an opportunity for China today, and I want to emphasize that. Because if President Joe Biden decides that his main priority should be to take care of the well-being of the American people. And the best way for America to take care of the well-being of the American people is to cooperate with other countries, with all the countries in the world, including with China. Because clearly the Chinese market is becoming bigger and bigger. And I always cite one statistic, which is very important that all Americans should know. The size of the retail goods market in China in 2009, about 11 years ago, was 1.8 trillion, when the United States retail goods market was 4 trillion, more than double that of China. But by 2019, 10 years later, China's retail goods market at 6 trillion was bigger than the United States retail goods market. So it makes sense for American businessmen to now go back and lobby the American government and say, hey, let's not give up on the biggest market in the world, which is China. So you see there is a danger in all the problems that are happening in America for China, but there are also opportunities. And I would say for China should give the Biden administration 6 months to settle down and just keep things as quiet as possible, to allow the Biden administration to work out what would hopefully be a sensible and constructive long-term policy towards China in the first 6 months.
But I still want to ask regarding what happened at the Capitol and the uncertain process we're still seeing before the inauguration. What's going to happen to a president that has been there for 4 years, pretty much of a controversy for both his own country and the rest of the world? And also, how is the U.S. political system likely to be readjusted, reset for some of the earlier mistakes that we have all witnessed?
When you ask about what's going to happen to President Trump, the answer is nobody knows. Because, I can tell you that when President Joe Biden assumes office on January 20th, he will be very torn, very, very torn between, on the one hand, in a sense, maybe applying the rule of law and saying that President Trump broke some major laws and prosecute President Trump. But if he goes for prosecuting of Donald Trump, the country will become more divided. There's still 74 million people who voted for Donald Trump. So he's got to decide. It's a very, very tough balance. And the best analogy of this is what happened after Watergate. And Watergate was a big scandal in American history. And of course, his President Richard Nixon's successor, Gerald Ford, could have gone to prosecute Richard Nixon, but he wisely decided to pardon Richard Nixon and close the chapter on that, because a prosecution would have been a very divisive move. Of course, that can only happen if President Trump decides to take a back seat and be quiet. But if President Trump launches a new political attack on the Biden administration, which is very, very possible, and if he launches a very, very strong attack, starts new social media agencies, talks at rallies, and makes the country even more angry, then he will leave Biden with no choice but to go after President Donald Trump.
Professor Mahbubani, if you were there to give advice to various government officials from different countries, what would you say? What would you suggest? What is their best bet to deal with the lowest level of unpredictability?
In this, especially, one word that neither you nor I have mentioned, by the way, which is very, very critical, it is going to be the key word for 2021, this year now, is still COVID-19, right? COVID-19 is, as you know, hitting Europe so badly, and also hitting the United States very badly. And if you had a sensible Biden administration, the sensible Biden administration will say, hey, let's stop everything else. Let's pause and just fight COVID-19. And frankly, what you should do, you should have a G20 meeting sometime in the near future, where like after the 2008-2009 financial crisis, just like the G20 meeting in London in 2009 under the chairmanship of Gordon Brown, saved the world from the 2008-2009 financial crisis. What we need in 2021 is a good G20 meeting where the whole world, especially China and the US, come together and cooperate against COVID-19. So, you and I have not mentioned this word, but this is the most critical challenge that the world faces. in the first 6 months of 2021.
Yeah. Professor Kishore Mahbubani, Distinguished Fellow from the Asia Research Institute of National University of Singapore. Sir, always a pleasure. Thank you so much. My earlier conversation with Kishore Mahbubani about what is happening in the U.S. and what it means for all of us. That's all the time we have for today. If you'd like to see more, try to find us World Insight. Check out our YouTube channel. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook. I'm Tian Wei. On behalf of the team, thanks for watching and bye for now.